is a possibility of, member countries influencing the governance within this particular institution.
They can't go to hospitals, so now the poor people have to leave their jobs and come take care of the people. So yes, they negatively affect the quality of life.
Over time, the mandate of the international financial institutions has been growing bigger.
Taxes are increased and expenditures on public goods are reduced. So they tell you, okay, so for you to be credit worthy, what you have to do, number one, you have to cut expenditure. Where do you cut expenditure? You cut expenditure on health and on education.
The most essential.
And it is possible for the Global South to actually overcome the reliance on international financial institutions.
Welcome to Regional Advocacy on Regressive Policies that Foster Inequality, a podcast series that explores how decisions at the international level affect or impact on communities, economies, and daily lives across Africa. This podcast series is powered by Tax Justice Network Africa. And today I am joined by my friend here, Ted, who is in his last year at Mount Kenya University, MKU, studying law. Welcome, Ted, to this podcast series. Please let viewers know a little bit more about yourself.
Thank you so much. As introduced, my name is Ted Kiania. I am last year, I'm in my final year of studies. I study law, and I'm also a co-founder of the Next Gen Policy Institute, where my friends and I have been trying to look into this space of development, public finance, and the impacts that international financial institutions and the entire global architecture has on how the African continent is as is today.
Thank you. And what we now call international financial institutions have introduced a number of programs, across African countries. And I know that we may not even have sufficient time to talk about all of them. But what are these main programs that IFIs have introduced, especially in African countries, and how are they being implemented currently?
Indeed, for us to understand how the global financial architecture is today, we have to go back to history. And the best part to start in history is around the 1980s, where we had the presidency of US President Ronald Reagan and UK Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. They were staunch capitalists and they pushed for liberalization. And President Reagan is famous for saying, small government is good government. Therefore, from what we saw in the West, they started cutting down on social programs and fostering and looking at gaining economic momentum. Therefore, that is the same playbook that was cascaded down into African countries, including Kenya, Ghana, Nigeria, and all other countries, where structural adjustment programs were introduced in the 1980s. The structural adjustment programs, they sought to, one, liberalize the market. This is to remove tariffs and quotas that imported goods from the global north were coming in. Those were removed. Currencies were devalued so as to make exports from these developing countries more attractive and to also allow the imports of goods from the global north. And we saw cuts in public spending and all that. Then towards the end of the 1990s, they realized that these programs, they had sort of done what they wanted to do, what they called stabilization. However, poverty and inequality had really risen. That's what they introduced, the poverty reduction and social development programs. So these programs were geared towards anchoring development assistance to reduction of poverty and these social goals. This is when we started seeing more funding towards education. We started seeing programs on health, on diseases like HIV, tuberculosis, malaria in Africa. And to a large extent, we saw free education introduced. healthcare outcomes sort of improved. However, it led to a dependence on aid because African countries got used to getting free money for free education, free ARVs and malaria drugs and all that.
Yeah.
And after 2010, we started seeing debt starting to rise with infrastructure projects mostly funded by China. But before we look into the period from 2010 till now, we have to look at around the period between 2009 2010. The IMF now transitioned to what they call the Extended Credit Facility.
ECF.
Yes, these are short-term loans to developing countries, which are tied down to some milestones.
Yes.
Such that and money is disbursed in tranches. So, for example, Kenya had a nine tranche sort of arrangement where they come and review semi-annually, and they look at whether you've implemented what you had agreed to do. If you've not implemented what you had agreed to do, you don't get the money.
Yeah.
And if you don't get the money, you don't have dollars, and dollars are needed to import fuel, medicines, machinery, and all that. So I think those are the main three programs that we can look at and how they've been based over the historical period till where we are today.
Till where we are.
Yeah.
And there has been a criticism that a lot of these programs have been very regressive. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, that is a huge debate all over the world.
Yeah.
And it was a debate in Sevilla, France, Spain, sorry. And I believe it's true to the largest extent. And first we have to look at what are these regressive policies. Regressive policies are generally some of the policies that unduly burden the poor in the society compared to the rich. I'll give some examples. Let's talk about taxes, for example. Kenya recently had increased the VAT on fuel. But if you look at the VAT on fuel, the price of fuel rises by about 8 shillings to 15 shillings. A person who drives a 4-liter engine vehicle, it does not matter whether a liter of fuel is at 200 shillings, at 300 shillings, at 100 shillings, it does not matter because they can afford it anyway.
Very true.
However, we have the normal mwananchi, the boda guy who has to buy the same fuel, the matatu guy who has to buy the same fuel, the transportation of goods and all that. Therefore, you end up, the poor end up hurting more, for example. Another good example I can give is the IFIs. They talk about targeted disbursement of these social programs. For example, education. In Kenya currently, there's a proposal for parents to start paying for the exams, the end of year exams for their children, those who do the 844 system, and any government national examination. And the justification is that rich parents should be able to pay, then the poor parents, the government will pay for them somehow. The same is usually made to all sectors, education, health, and all that.
Yeah.
However, if you consider that African countries are really poor countries, and most of these countries, over half of the population, lives under the poverty line. Therefore, how will you choose who do you give that assistance and who you do not give that assistance? Also considering that we lack data in Africa. People are not in the formal system, so they don't pay income taxes and all that.
Yeah.
Therefore, how do you know that this person is rich, this person is
poor?
So some of those programs that have been introduced are not alive to the African realities, and they end up hurting the poor more. But at the end of the day, we look at economic indicators. What is the rate of growth? What is the rate of inflation? What is the budget deficit? All that. But for that common mwananchi, that common man, all they want to know is, will I afford food tonight? Will my children go to school? If I go to that dispensary, will I get medicine? They don't understand all these economic terms and all that. Therefore, I think what some of these policies are intended to do, they are not alive to African realities. Maybe the Western realities, they actually work, but here in Africa, it's totally different.
It doesn't work. Yeah, and in the implementation of these policies, The question has been, are IFIs really upholding standards of transparency? Are they upholding standards of accountability? Are they upholding standards of equity? And there's been criticism, about their ability to uphold those standards. What are some of these criticisms, and how are IFIs responding? How have they responded so far?
Yeah, those are some of the criticisms, especially the youth, the Gen Z are coming up with, and they're like, we are not consulted in these things. But one of the most common replies have been, oh, your government is responsible, not us. For example, Kenya, we've been in an IMF, we have been under an IMF program. However, if you look at the details of that program, including the targets, the specific targets that we are supposed to meet, how we are supposed to meet them, when we are supposed to meet them, and after we meet those targets, what do we get? It's still shrouded in a lot of secrecy. That we are put under a program, we are taxed to support that program. Social services are cut so as to achieve what is called fiscal consolidation, but we do not know why these things are being done. That is why in countries like Kenya, you saw the youth on the streets after the finance bill of 2024, because still many of these things are shrouded in secrecy. But what we've continued to hear is that ask your government. And for example, just this June, the World Bank released a radical debt transparency report, where they stated that most developing countries don't have accurate data on debt. They do not publish it, or they do not publish it on time, and all that. And therefore, you can see they are trying to push countries, especially in the developing world, to disclose these debt issues. However, considering the African realities and the global South, how we are, the governance structures are not as developed. If you leave the disclosure of debt to politicians, especially in Africa, we'll never get that. And debt is a responsibility of both the creditor and the borrower. Therefore, it can't be that the responsibility is shifted only on one side. And any program that is instituted, it has to be equitable, such that the common man down there does not feel the pinch too much. Because of the nature of taxes, if you look at the developing world, if you compare it to the developed world, we have very different realities. In the developed world, we have so many direct taxes because people are on a formal payroll. They pay personal income taxes, they pay corporate income taxes. You can see everything on a system.
Yes.
In developing countries, it's not that clear. So governments resort to indirect taxes. Talk about your VAT, your excise duty, and such other taxes. Indirect taxes are not as targeted as income taxes, because income taxes, we can talk about manipulating or changing the scales as they are to make them more equitable. But when most developing countries, more than half of their revenue comes from indirect taxes, that is VAT, excise duty, and the rest. That means that the liter of fuel you're buying for someone who has a 6-liter engine, a 4-liter engine, it's the same amount that a person with a small piki, a small motorbike is paying.
Very true.
Therefore, it brings out the issue of equity when these taxes that are introduced are not equitably cascaded down to the people. And to couple that, to shield them, there is a need to have social programs. They talk about direct cash transfers and the like. However, you find that these programs, despite being well-intentioned, they are heavily underfunded. As I said, most African countries and countries in the developing world, more than half of their population lives under the poverty line. Therefore, how do you choose who is vulnerable, who needs that cash transfer, who does not need it, yet everyone is poor, you see? So I think those are some of the structural issues that we have to look into, and not only think about the economic fundamentals and things such as those.
Yeah, thank you. And it would be good to unpack this further. The regressive impacts that we are seeing of the policies that are coming from the IFIs, are they part of a broader economic or a broader global financial architecture? Is it a broader governance problem, or is it just restricted to what we are seeing in developing countries?
After the 1980s, they came to be a term known as the Washington Consensus. It is about how economies are supposed to be run. And therefore, that is when we saw the issue of liberalization, cutting down public goods and all that. The intention of the liberalization of the 80s was to spur economic growth. And the truth is, it did spur a lot of economic growth. Economies grew at rates they had never grown. However, as economies grew, inequality also grew. And remember, the way to the model to turbocharge these economies was to cut public goods and government expenditure and leave everything to the private sector, make it highly capitalistic. Therefore, the poor were left without any social safety nets. And that is the global financial architecture we still have up to today.
To date, yes.
Yes, if you look at IFIs like the IMF, its primary responsibility is to ensure that there is the balance of payments. The balance of payments is the difference between the goods a country exports and what it imports. Remember that about 85% of world trade is done using the US dollar. Therefore, any country, especially in the developing world, you require dollars for you to import anything. And think about this as basic commodities which are inelastic, things like fuel. Every car needs fuel, so you'll have to get fuel somehow. And a lot of importation of medicines, a lot of farm machinery, and also foodstuff, especially in mineral-rich countries. You find that they abandon agriculture and go totally into minerals. So even food is imported using US dollars. Therefore, the global architecture is structured such that countries in the developing world never lack hard currency. In this case, the US dollar, because the US dollar is what enables them to import from the global north goods and services. And therefore, that system, and if you consider that African countries and developing countries, they do low productivity jobs and export low productivity goods and services. Think about the Africans emigrating to the Middle East, to Europe, to Asia. Many of them, they go there to become drivers, housemaids, and things like that.
Laborers.
Yes, those are not jobs that earn a lot of income. Think about the export of primary commodities. Think about cocoa, think about coffee, think about tea. They are sold at...
You know, we even export our minerals raw. You know, very primary, as you're calling them,
And you find that after being refined, they're sold at 5 times what the raw materials were sold for. Therefore, we end up in a persistent trade deficit, such that the value of the goods and services we are exporting is way less than the value of goods and services that we are importing.
All the time.
And therefore, the global financial architecture is such that, you cannot afford a road. You need roads. So what we'll do, we'll give you a loan to build roads and show your people that there's development. But the contractor has to be our person. The materials have to come from us, and it is not free. You will have to pay us. Then you face difficulties in paying, and they tell you, don't worry. What you can do, you can just take another loan from us and
stabilize your economy.
Stabilize your economy and pay the other loan. And remember, the population is growing. Your taxes, because many of these expenditures, especially on importing goods and services, especially if they go into infrastructure developments, the economic yield is very low. Therefore, the tax revenue does not grow as fast as the debt is growing. So you find that the global financial architecture is structured in such a way as to, one, guarantee the import of refined goods and services, high value goods and services from the global north into the global south. And this is also facilitated by other international organizations, big companies such as the credit rating agencies. So they tell you, okay, so for you to be credit worthy, what you have to do, number one, you have to cut expenditure. Where do you cut expenditure? You cut expenditure on health and on education.
The most essential.
The most essential. Then they tell you have to raise taxes for you to be able to service our debt. And if you say no, what follows? A downgrade. A downgrade by a credit rating agency. One, it means that the amount, the pool of funds that you can access in debt, it shrinks because investors now call you risky. Number two, the investors think you are risky, so there's no capital inflows into the country. And another impact is interest rates go up. Therefore, if you refuse to increase your taxes and cut expenditures, you will have to borrow at way higher costs. And consider most of this money we need, it's essential money. It's money to buy fuel, money to import food, money to import medicines.
And they often have numerous justifications on why countries ought to have austerity measures in place, why countries ought to move towards privatization of, especially those services that are very critical. What are some of the justifications that IFIs have put on the table for this?
The number one justification and the most common is what they call fiscal consolidation. That is a big term for increasing your revenues and cutting your expenditure. Essentially, tax your people more and cut the services that you're giving them. And
or ensure that they are paying for those services.
Yes, they now pay out of pocket. The government doesn't pay.
Very true.
So if you think about it, if it was in a normal household or an individual, if you go broke, what do? You just stop eating meat very often. You sacrifice maybe some Netflix and things like that, and you look for a side hustle.
Take shorter showers.
Yeah, to spare the electricity.
Yeah,
and look for a side hustle to earn more income.
Yeah,
but the same cannot apply to countries because what happens when taxes are increased and expenditures on public goods are reduced? What mostly happens is economies sort of slow down. So when an economy starts to slow down, the rate at which taxes are growing also reduces. So at the end of it, you find it becomes counterproductive, such that a country is suffering because citizens have to pay more out of pocket for services and they have to pay more taxes, yet the debt situation is not improving. And this is the situation in very many African countries. And in the very in the instances that the economy is growing and the things look like they are stabilizing, what is actually happening is inequality is really growing. If you look at inequality pre and post these programs, you find that inequality really grows because there are people who are making money from these policies. Think about it. If the government cuts money that it's spending on education, it means you have to take your child to a private school. Who can afford to build a private school? Only a moneyed person. And in countries like Africa, the people who have money are the politicians. So I will build a private school, then you will bring your child because the public school system is bad. Therefore, that is how you start seeing wealth transfer, some people becoming really rich, while the rest become really poor. So the gap between the rich and the poor really increases.
Continues to grow, yeah.
Another justification is, back to the 1980s, like Ronald Reagan said, small government is good government. So they tell you, the government is too big. So many of these programs that the government is doing, they should be left to private sector. So start privatization. And you think about these parastatals, these state-owned enterprises. Yes, there are some that are not really doing well, but there are some which are essential. For example, water services, they are offered by state-owned enterprises. Things like energy and energy companies in the energy sector, they offer public goods to everyone. Think about your fuel transportation, people who are selling your electricity and things like that. Think about something like the railway. The railway is something people used to commute to go to work and come back home. And the difference between when it is in private hands and when it is in public hands is that when the government controls some of these enterprises, it's sort of subsidized for the common citizen.
Yeah, because the government is not in the business of making a profit.
Yeah, but if I'm a private investor, the number one priority is how do I make my money back?
Recoup my capital.
Yes.
Get some profit.
And pay my shareholders.
Very true.
And live a nice life from that. So you find that the cost of living really rises because it is not coupled with subsidies or sort of support to those who cannot afford this now privatized companies and the like. And if you think about it, these privatized companies, when they were state-owned, they acquire assets and pay employees and do all that. And due to these subsidies, sometimes they go into losses. And who foots the bill for these losses? It is the taxpayer. Because if the company makes losses, the taxpayer will have to pay. But when it's privatized, the taxpayer, yes, the money they would have spent there, at least they are saving it right now. But look at the flip side. You have pumped millions, hundreds of millions or billions of dollars into this company to make it acquire assets and become what it is today. Then it is sold at a throwaway price to a private individual, and then all the suffering and all the payments you've been making, they now go down the drain. But an IFI will tell you that this is the best model due to corruption, especially in the global south. And corruption is a very huge issue. But it begs the question, so do we fight corruption or do we privatize?
Yeah.
Because you're told, okay, the reason we are removing this company from government hands is because those in government, when they see this company, all they do is eat.
Bribe, steal, engage in corruption.
So if you give someone who wants to make profit, the corruption will end.
They'll be more efficient.
Which is true, but if you look at even the West, the global North, many of the enterprises that now exist, they were one state-owned for those which have been privatized. And if you look at pre-privatization and post-privatization, you can see that these companies have really grown. They've become multinationals, they've expanded, they have gone into other continents. However, the cost of living, the cost of goods and services for the common man has tremendously increased. Therefore, it is, so are you looking at economic gain or are you looking at the social? Because I think that is where there is always a disconnect in this debate. Because an IFI will talk about the economics. And the economics, in the most part, they do make sense. But you ignore the social. And without the people, there's no economics, because it's the people who build an economy.
Very true.
And when we see privatization and cuts, and especially in critical areas such as education and healthcare, because those are the only paths for most people in the developing world to come out of poverty. If you cannot go to school, you are condemned to poverty. So the only way out is through education. And if you are not healthy, if there's prevalence of malaria, for example, you will not make it to 5 years, so you will die. If you make it past that, think even at commodities that we ignore, things like even contraceptives. If girls fall pregnant before they can attain their full education, the cycle of poverty continues.
Yeah.
So we have to look at the social, because without the social, and if you think about the developing world, we keep on saying that the best resource we have is our people, and especially our youth.
Yeah.
The developing world, 75% is youth. And in many countries, especially in Africa, you find the median age is about 19, 17. Therefore, without investing in this human capital, we cannot really catch up to the rest of the world. Therefore, that is now the grim side of the economics. Yeah.
Thank you so much. In conclusion, parting shot,
Yeah.
in 2 words.
2 words.
Summarize.
My parting shot is that we really need a reform to the global financial architecture. However, our leaders, especially African leaders, should stop paying lip service to this issue. Because they go to conferences, they talk about the unfair global financial architecture, what it's doing to its people and all that. Then the following day, they're on a flight going to these same IFIs and borrowing.
To beg.
You know, you cannot be criticizing the global financial architecture on one side, then tomorrow you are on a plane going there for what they call talks. You go there for talks and you are put under a program, or the program you're already in, it is reviewed and all that.
Yeah.
Therefore, it is time for us to start taking actionable steps. Relook at the balance of payments issues, strengthen trade in local currencies to eliminate the dependence on the dollar, and generally start working on it. I think we've paid enough lip service. We already know the problems. It's time to act.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Ted, for joining us. To our viewers, thank you for listening in to this podcast series on regressive policies that foster inequality. This podcast series, stay tuned to follow more on this particular issue. We encourage you to share. We encourage you to subscribe to our channels, and please stay tuned for even more discussions that look at how the global financial architecture continues to impact on lives, economies, and how we do better for a better Africa. Thank you.